All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to 9 p.m. with Galinsky. I'm here with the Grandmaster of the NFAC. This is a special interview, unannounced and timely and important. Good to see you, Grandmaster Jay. Thanks for being with me.
You too, Mr. Galinsky. How are you?
I'm good. We're getting ready for the cold here in New York, and there's snow. Why don't you, just for the people who aren't familiar with the NFAC, can you tell us what that is, and then we'll get to the point about what this conversation is more about in terms of our timeline.
Sure, no problem. The NFAC is America's only all-Black American militia. And the purpose of the NFAC has been stated many times publicly is to protect the Black community, self-police the Black community, and also to educate the Black community on their constitutional rights with regards to the Second Amendment and First Amendment when it comes to a lot of these protests and so forth, or trying to get the government to practice equal justice, as we like to call it. That's our purpose. We've been around publicly now in the public eye for about 7 months. We've been instrumental in several high-profile killings of African Americans, most notably the Ahmaud Arbery case in Brunswick, Georgia, and then of course the situation in Louisville, Kentucky, regarding Breonna Taylor, getting transparency into that case and getting involved in the actual manifestation of some of our formations, shows of force. We are also heavily involved in exemplifying, per the Constitution and per the law, how all of this is done without breaking any laws. Our organization has a zero incident track record with regards to property destruction, with regards to firing a shot at anyone, or also having any of our members arrested. We've worked along with police departments in each municipality to ensure that all of our activities are in accordance with the law. And they've been very successful, and we've been spoken very highly of by some of those law enforcement agencies, as well as the mayors and all the other folks that are involved in any of the places where the NFAC has shown itself. Additionally, the NFAC is internationally affiliated with several other groups that share some of the same views with regards to the application of human rights and the equalization of the application of law with regards to Black people around the world. So we are an internationally affiliated yet local all-Black militia, and we are, at last report, have never been classified as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, have never been classified as a terrorist group according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. So we don't wear those titles, and some folks would tend to equate us to on the level of the Black Panthers, one of these other groups that have already been around for a while, when in fact we're an entirely new organization comprised of a law-abiding American citizens who are legal gun owners, many of us are veterans, many of us are regular citizens from all walks of life that got organized into what's now known as the NFAC, the Not Effing Around Coalition, if you will. And if you Google us, you can learn a lot more, or you can visit our website at blacknfac.com.
That's right. And everything I've witnessed, I've seen news reports and whatnot, have all showed that your harmony with law enforcement and with municipalities has been 100%, which makes it very upsetting to see what has transpired over the past few weeks with you. And that is the arrest. You were arrested recently, and you're so much more obviously familiar with these charges, these trumped up charges, I would say. Can you explain to us the situation that happened and what the arrest was based on?
I'm going to speak very cautiously here because I don't want to say anything that would jeopardize the case. But just to give you the high level, I was surprised when I was arrested by an FBI task force, which is part of a new task force that was created by the U.S. government a couple of months ago. I think it's back in, I think it might have been earlier than that, it might have been June, July, but they were given the mission of targeting groups that espoused what they called an anti-government theology. You'll hear that term coming out now. These were the folks you saw riding around in Portland, snatching folks off the street, a kind of quasi-military unit. It's actually what visited me, along with other members of law enforcement, and I was arrested. And I was actually told that I had apparently been accused of pointing a weapon at police officers, which was completely out of left field for me. I'm like, well, when did this happen? Because in America, we have a track record that proves that, well, to be honest, black men pointing weapons at police officers or federal agents doesn't end well for the black person. We've got people who've been shot for less. Matter of fact, we just had a young man who was shot over a sandwich. So if this was completely out of left field, but that was the accusation, and that was the charge from the federal level. And then the state of Kentucky decided to pile on to that and add the same charge that they charged the officer who fired shots into the home of Breonna Taylor, killing her. They charged him with wanton endangerment. They charged me with that also. Apparently, I wantonly endangered someone when I shined a flashlight, allegedly, at these officers, as they're telling me that they are. This was the accusation, and of course, everyone says these charges are trumped up because they said this happened back in September when we were there for the Derby. For anyone who knows anything about the NFAC, we were returning to Louisville to apply more pressure on the legislature, the government, and law enforcement to resolve the Breonna Taylor case, which had been dragging on for God knows how long. And during this time, this is when it was alleged that I had done this incident, yet they did not come to see me and arrest me and bring a task force to my home to confiscate all of my weapons and anything related to NFAC to come get me now at the beginning of December. There's some real questions there because it's not like I haven't been back to Louisville. It's not like I haven't been in the presence of law enforcement, including a new police chief. So I find it interesting that, this happened. So this is the situation we're in right now. So I'm looking at fighting two cases, one at the federal level and one at the state level, which has gotten a lot of attention because of who it was that was targeted and the fact that it screams in the face of inequality when you look at the behavior of some past militia members of white persuasion who managed to point guns at federal officials, storm state houses, take over federal buildings, and we saw none of this. So it raises a bunch of questions that we hope to answer as we move through this process.
And this interview is got stipulations as well, for those of you watching and listening, that we are not going to be able to put this up as a live feed. And at some point, maybe this will go up on social media as a pre-recorded conversation. Can you speak to that, those rights that have been taken away from you?
You cut right to the heart of the matter. The charges are what they are. And the federal process follows its process as it does. There's nothing new here. What we found interesting was that one of the conditions of me being released from federal custody was that I was not conduct activities on social media, specifically social media, not the internet, but social media. And when I heard this, the question was raised, why? Well, what's the deal with social media? What does social media have to do with this entire affair? Well, the answer was this is just one of the conditions. You can either accept it or you can stay in federal custody. So, of course, thinking that, we'll fight this later in court, I went ahead and agreed to it. Thus, I've been silent on social media. Here's the catch. The catch to it is this. Why was it important to add that? Well, you have to remember that outside of the NFAC, I'm very popular as an internet personality, so to speak. I have a radio show that I do called Facts Over Feelings, and another morning show that I do called The Morning Mental, which, depending on, your religious preference or your knowledge of history, may not be your cup of tea. But at the end of the day, there's a huge following there. And it was those people who put pressure on law enforcement, put pressure on the system, made phone calls and came walking through doors when they did arrest me, that expedited my release. So therefore, them silencing me or taking away my First Amendment right speaks more so to the question of what exactly was the purpose of this exercise. Was it really to disarm me or was it to shut me up? because of the fact that the popularity and the message of inspiration across the Black community that was being seen as a direct result of the manifestation of the NFAC was something that would probably run counter to some of the gun proposal policies of the incoming administration. If you study Joe Biden's gun plan, folks like myself and organizations like the NFAC and even white militias would find it almost impossible, extremely expensive to own the firepower that the Constitution allows us to own today. So I think that there are some decisions that may have been made at higher levels that we need to start to dismantle this culture that has developed in America over the last 8 to 12 years, where we now have these groups of armed citizens of polarizing views that at some point may initiate some type of conflict, even though the NFAC has never attacked anyone, has never threatened anyone. The NFAC has never had to fire a shot nor had a confrontation with anyone. We have a completely zero track record because we operate within the confines of the law.
You mentioned that your organization's an inspiration for Black people, and I know the point is not to be an inspiration for white people per se, but I've got to tell you, your organization, NFAC, is quite inspirational to white folk, just so you know. People I've talked to have spoken that very highly of NFAC for being present and balancing what looks like a very unbalanced situation with white militias showing up, waving guns and weaponry on federal property, around federal agents, but also just, in general, to see the strength of somebody stepping forward to organize the Black community in the face of what we're seeing now with white militias.
I think that
You're muted. We lost your connection for a moment, sir.
I'm not sure why that kicked in.
my phone should be silent.
All right.
There we are. It is back silent again. We shall not be interrupted. I wanted to add to what you just said that I think that, and I've heard this, what you said echoed in many areas, but I think what's interesting about the current situation is that when you start to look at the fact that the NFAC has operated within a certain methodology that, as you said, does kind of land us in the middle, bringing sanity to an insane situation, yet not going over the edge, taking us into chaos, which is what it has the potential to do. Most people would think that when you introduce guns into a protest, that all of a sudden the risk is increased. What people fail to realize is once violence is initiated within a protest, it is no longer a protest. It is a riot. And that in itself is a crime. So people who are confusing protests with rioting tend to believe that the introduction of unorganized guns, I would agree, would result in some form of chaos. But organized, well-regulated militias present at these protests simply as a show of force, not to engage, not to provoke, not to be incendiary to anyone. Just a show of what militias have been in history. They are political tools. They are an exclamation point at the end of a sentence. They are not there to attack anyone. They're there to defend their point if necessary, or if negotiations break down, to at least be able to retreat, to beat a hasty retreat in fashion. That's the purpose there. So when you think about the fact that, number one, you're talking about a group that follows a leader, when most folks have tried what they call decentralized movements, but there's no central spokesperson. Everyone's pretty much operating like a McDonald's franchise. They're doing their own thing, Burger King. But here we have a structure. And I think that's something that a lot of folks, we try to exemplify as a blueprint. NFAC was a blueprint for other folks to emulate. So we could bring chaos, bring order to a chaotic situation. Now, we also developed this methodology of holding each other accountable within the group, identifying what our goal was, not just going in to be there. We had to have a specific reason. Justice for Breonna Taylor was a prime example. Making sure that everybody, even no matter how you felt about the situation, maybe you just weren't cut out for this particular type of organization. Making sure we screen a lot of those folks out. And last but not least, making sure that we realize that life is bigger than social media. This is not social media. This is the real world. We don't talk on social media unnecessarily. We try not to get caught up in the social media world and some of the rumors and some of the, you know how social media can be. Yep. We operate in the real world, just like we follow folks like yourself. We follow the journals. We follow the Times. We follow everyone. We want to stay abreast of what's going on. We're not just a bunch of folks with guns. I think that's the difference here, is that a lot of these folks don't understand that there's a difference between meeting up and then assembly. There's a very big difference between implementing systems where we understand both sides so we don't make a mistake. This is the work that wasn't being put in. So folks who've had high marks for the NFAC, I've noticed those things. They've communicated that to us. We have a clear-cut mission, and we have a clear-cut purpose. Whenever we show up, we're just for that. We can't be swayed from it. We're not pulled into anything else. We're not, you can't come and give us some last-minute breaking news that's going to make us fly over the top. We don't work that way. We're very, very regimented. That's why this current situation is so interesting to me, because anyone who's ever watched me, even publicly on some of the TV shows, have heard me say it many times. Do not point your weapon at anyone unless they point one at you first. That is my opening briefing at every formation, is to capture it on camera. Yet all of a sudden, I'm supposed to have done the opposite. And that's where we are, and I just want to add that.
It's interesting that when the more organized and professional and disciplined you come across, the more threatening you also seem to come across, as opposed to the other way around.
Well, that's a matter of perspective. We don't come across as threatening to anyone. Threatening to law enforcement or to the government. I would have to disagree with you there, and this is why this is so ironic. Most of the law enforcement agencies that the NFAC has had to encounter in gaining permits and getting safety buffers set up and trying to brainstorm ways for things not to go wrong. Most of those agencies have been very professional, and it wasn't that they didn't do things begrudgingly. They did what they had to do. They learned some things about us, and they've admitted that. I've been a couple of places where they showed up, like you said, not too happy we were there, but by the time it was over, these guys were like, "Wow, you guys really were professional. You were very organized. You did exactly what you said you were going to do, even when things happened that had nothing to do with you, that could have taken us somewhere else. You stayed. We appreciate that. You made our job very easy." So it's not so much law enforcement per se that is intimidated by us. It is those members within law enforcement who still carry some of the same mental stereotypes that throw back to the 60s and the 50s. They're still around. Or they've learned these beliefs, and it impedes their judgment or their execution of their office as an officer. Those are the people, when they see the very same people that they know that there's been this unfortunate track record of shootings, and when you see those folks getting organized, when you see those folks getting armed, when you see those folks protecting themselves, looking out for their own, self-policing themselves in a proactive fashion rather than the reactive fashion that gets someone shot, you're intimidated by that, because of the simple fact that, and I've heard this said many times, just because an organization hasn't committed an act of terrorism doesn't mean that one day they won't. Well, I hate to say this, the police department has proven to us that that's true, because as far as the Black community is concerned right now, they feel that they're being the victims of a terrorist plot against them at the hands of the police, and the police have yet to address that. No one's saying defund the police and the chaos, but when does the change start? When is it we move from a place of you waiting to be told to do it? When do you adopt the same mentality that you saw all the big businesses adopt in the wake of George Floyd global protests? All of a sudden, every Fortune 500 company was putting on commercials of we're inclusive and, Black Lives Matter. You saw this wave of, but silence from the Fraternal Order of Police, silence from the Police Chiefs Union, silence from the FBI, silence from law enforcement.
On Friday, you're going to be in court again, and I'm hoping that we get a report, or we can report that some of the sanctions that have been put upon you are uplifted. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening on Friday? And then let's let's close it up with and take your time, but what is it you need? I know you need, your lawyers are going to cost a lot of money. You got federal and state charges. So I know that, but let's talk about what's going to happen Friday, hopefully, and what can people do to support what's going on with you?
Friday, this Friday, the 18th, I will be appearing in Kentucky State Court. This is for the answer to the state charges. This will be a preliminary hearing. I will enter a plea, and folks will know what that plea is at that time. That's what's happening this Friday. No more, no less. That's all there is. There is no movement at this time in the federal space. They move a little slower than the states move here. So that's what's happening Friday. As far as supporting, you're right. I'm fighting two cases at the same time. One at the federal level, one at the state level, and as you can imagine, lawyers of the caliber to take on a case like this have already, I've already talked with. They're not cheap, and this is not going to be something that's going to go away overnight. There has been a GoFundMe started for my legal defense fund. It is the Grandmasterjay Legal Defense Fund. That's what it's called on GoFundMe. And so if you want to contribute, or if you have it in your heart to see that there's definitely been some type of injustice done here, that all of a sudden the leader of the only black militia who has been law-abiding and broken no laws up to this point and only operated within the Constitution suddenly is the target of an FBI operation because he threatened law enforcement officials 3 months ago. Okay. That's what's going on now. So I've got to beat both those cases in order to get my Second Amendment rights back, get my First Amendment rights back. Because right now I'm under some form of a gag order that we hope will be lifted before the end of the week. We challenge that by motion. We'll see how that turns out. In the meantime, here's what I really need. I need folks to be aware that this is not history repeating itself. This is people repeating history. And I'm going to be fair. I'm going to be very blunt here. Is that there are those in the community who feel that this is some form of political payback. There are some who feel that this is just good old-fashioned COINTELPRO. There are some who feel that, as you said before, Mr. Galinsky, that maybe someone in the government felt threatened by watching this type of activity. We need to spread the word that they raided my home on the anniversary of the assassination of Fred Hampton, who also died in the same type of operation. The only difference was I didn't go out in a blaze of glory. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I was told to come out, so I came out. At the end of the day, now we're in a position where I have to now go through the judicial process. And I implore you all to spread the word of what is happening here, because this is now happening in the same jurisdiction of the place where I raised the awareness to get transparency into the case of Breonna Taylor, Louisville, Kentucky. So I think that this is something that you want to definitely keep your eye on. I myself will be negotiating through this maze of legalities, and on the other side of this, hope that we can finish this conversation. And in the meantime, I just need folks to be aware that even though folks say this is the home of the brave and land of the free and all of that, there are still those of us who feel as if it's still us against an unequal system. And simply for standing up for our rights or exercising our constitutional rights that we thought applied to all of us, it looks like the same old song again. And I think it's up to folks like yourself to make a difference. And I'm not just talking to black folks, I'm talking to everyone. It's up to you all to make a difference. We know that right is right and wrong is wrong. And right now, a great wrong is being committed. Because if they'll do something like this to me, what makes you think they'll stop and not come after you next? So I'm counting on your support, morally, financially. Keep me in your prayers. And the NFAC is not going anywhere. They'll still be there. The question is, where will I be? Thank you, Mr. Galinsky.
Thank you, Grandmaster Jay. Everybody, today's December 16th. Just to put a timestamp on this, the Grandmaster Jay at in the GoFundMe. Go search that if you can make a contribution. Otherwise, please share articles, share this article if and when you see it. And Grandmaster Jay, thanks for your time. We'll talk to you after Friday, and good luck on Friday.
Thank you, Mr. Galinsky. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir.